Dr. Varen Cal stood in the dimly lit lab, a place where dreams of progress came to die, usually drowned in a sea of bureaucratic idiocy and an ocean of broken promises. His fingers tapped a staccato beat on the console as he peered through the reinforced glass at the human behind it. Here they are, he muttered to himself, the galaxy's most stubborn species. The Xylaris had gone to great lengths to build this research base far from prying eyes, a secret fortress tucked away in a forgotten corner of the universe where the Xylaris could indulge in their favorite pastime, poking at humanity like a child poking a sleeping bear, blissfully unaware of the claws and teeth hiding behind its eyes. Doctor Cal, a voice purred from behind him, smooth as poison. It was Clix, the Xylaris overseer. His skin was the color of a rotting peach, and his eyes held the warmth of a dead fish. Have we made any progress today? Cal turned, forcing a smile that could have curdled milk. Oh, loads. If by progress you mean watching a bunch of humans refuse to adapt to this delightful prison you call a research base. Clix's eyes narrowed, the corners of his thin lips twitching. Your sarcasm is noted, but perhaps a bit more diligence would yield results, and perhaps a bit more freedom would yield better subjects. Cal shot back, his patience thinner than a Xylaris' sense of humor. Turning back to the glass, Cal watched Mira Thane, the most defiant of the humans, as she paced her cell like a caged lioness. If anyone could find a way out, it was Mira. Her resourcefulness was as legendary as her scathing one-liners. Mira glanced up, her eyes locking onto Cal's. Got any bright ideas for an escape plan, Doc? Or still working on that whole pretending to help us thing? Cal leaned closer to the glass, lowering his voice. Just biding my time, Mira. You know how it is. Rome wasn't built in a day. Neither was this lovely hellhole, Mira replied, gesturing around her cell, a minimalistic masterpiece of Xylaris architecture. But I'm sure it's only a few IKEA hacks away from being livable. You keep me entertained, Cal sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. For what it's worth, I am working on something. Yeah, work faster, Mira shot back, a smirk playing on her lips. Otherwise, I might have to get creative with the furniture. I don't doubt it, Cal replied, noting the gleam in her eyes. It was the kind of gleam that made him grateful for the glass between them. Just then, the sound of alarms sliced through the air, a shrill reminder that in space, nothing ever went smoothly. Red lights bathed the corridor in a harsh glow, turning everyone into shadowy figures of doom. What now? Cal grumbled, his heart picking up speed as he glanced at Clix. The Xylaris was already tapping into his communicator, a sleek device that looked suspiciously like a brick. Intruder alert, Clix announced, his voice laced with annoyance. The perimeter has been breached. Fantastic, Cal drawled, reaching for the emergency protocols. Another day in paradise. Mira's smirk widened into a full grin. Sounds like it's party time. Maybe the cavalry's finally here, or maybe just another group of morons thinking they can outsmart the Xylaris, Cal replied, shaking his head. Either way, it's about to get interesting. The alarms continued their relentless wailing as Clix barked orders to his subordinates, the Xylaris scuttling about in a panic that was almost comical if you discounted the deadly implications. You should probably hang tight, Mira, Cal advised, though he knew she wouldn't listen. Things are about to get messy. Messy is my middle name, Mira quipped, flexing her hands. Or it would be if I had a middle name. Cal chuckled despite himself. Just try not to get dead. I'm not sure how I'd explain it in my next report. The base shuddered as something collided with it, a warning of chaos to come. Cal felt his stomach drop into his boots, a familiar sensation in a place where things went wrong more often than they went right. Brace yourselves, Clix warned, his voice vibrating with a mix of fear and excitement. The Xylaris did love a good crisis, preferably one they could control. Here we go, Cal muttered, as the door to the lab hissed open, revealing a squad of heavily armed Xylaris soldiers. They looked like the unfortunate offspring of a pufferfish and a cactus, and just as friendly. Dr. Cal, their leader rasped, his voice like gravel, you're to come with us. Lead the way, Cal replied, resigned. It's not like I was doing anything important. As he followed them out, he cast one last glance at Mira. She gave him a thumbs up, the kind of gesture that said, don't worry, I've got this. And for some inexplicable reason, Cal believed her. The corridors were a blur of activity as he was escorted through the base, Xylaris scientists rushing to their posts, guards mobilizing to handle whatever had breached their defenses. It was the kind of chaos that made Cal nostalgic for simpler times, like when he was a kid and the worst thing he had to worry about was his next biology exam. What's the plan then? He asked the soldier, who was too busy looking menacing to answer. The silence was answer enough. There was no plan. Cal sighed. Typical, he muttered under his breath. Always ready to shoot, never ready to think. Back in Mira's cell, the chaos was music to her ears. It was the kind of opportunity that didn't come twice, and she wasn't about to let it slip through her fingers. All right, she said to herself, scanning the cell for makeshift tools. Let's see what we can work with. A loose panel in the corner caught her eye, a tiny imperfection in an otherwise flawless design. "Bingo," she whispered, moving to pry it open with a piece of metal she'd managed to snag from the last maintenance round. The metal screeched as it gave way, revealing a tangled mess of wires, a veritable playground for someone who knew what they were doing. Mira's grin widened. "Looks like someone's getting a new haircut." As she worked, the alarms blaring above her head, Mira couldn't help but relish the absurdity of it all. Here she was on an alien base, plotting her escape with a handful of tools and a whole lot of nerve. Her mother would be proud, probably. With a final tug, the wires sparked to life, the lights in her cell flickering for a moment before going dark. "That ought to do it," she chortled, slipping out through the maintenance shaft she'd uncovered. Hope they didn't pay too much for this security system. Crawling through the tight confines of the shaft, Mira's mind raced with possibilities. Out there somewhere was a way off this rock, and she intended to find it, preferably before the Xylaris decided to dissect her for real. Meanwhile, Dr. Varencal found himself in the Xylaris control room, staring at the chaos unfolding on the monitors. The breach had come from a ragtag group of human resistance fighters, if you could call a bunch of adrenaline junkies with more guts than brains fighters. "This is what happens when you think humans are just lab rats," Cal said to no one in particular, though Clix was within earshot. Xylaris Overseer glared at him, his patience wearing thin. "Your loyalty is touching, Doctor." "Loyalty's overrated," Cal replied, eyes fixed on the screens. "Survival's where it's at." Mira's escape was swift and stealthy as she navigated the bowels of the base, driven by a combination of rage and desperation that focused her mind like a laser. Every turn brought her closer to freedom or a grisly end. Back in the control room, Cal watched as the resistance fighters clashed with Xylaris guards, each side as determined as the other. It was madness, plain and simple, and it made Cal wonder. It wasn't a question of who would win, but who would survive. "Your thoughts, Dr. Cal?" Clix asked, his voice dripping with contempt. Cal shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "Honestly, I'm just here for the popcorn. Your wit will be your downfall," Clix warned, his eyes cold. "Wouldn't be the first time," Cal shot back, unfazed. In the midst of the chaos, Mira emerged from the shaft into a storage room, the door to freedom just beyond her reach, but it was heavily guarded, as she expected. "All right, boys," Mira whispered, pulling out her makeshift weapon, part screwdriver, part glorified stick. "Let's see how much trouble we can cause." As the Xylaris guards closed in, Mira braced herself, a fierce determination burning in her eyes. Whatever happened next, it wouldn't be dull. With a battle cry that would have made her ancestors proud, Mira charged, setting off a chain reaction of chaos that promised to engulf the entire base. "Bring it on," she spat, and the game was on. In his lab, far from the action, Cal felt a twinge of something dangerously close to hope. Maybe, just maybe, this would be the start of something. If not a revolution, then at least a damn good story to tell, Doctor. Varencal stood in his lab, contemplating the human brain like a man pondering a doomed souffle. He was neck-deep in Xylaris research on human adaptability, particularly why these creatures seem to thrive on adversity, like weeds in a sidewalk crack. It was a fascinating puzzle, one that could potentially turn the tide of the Xylaris' endless string of uninspired failures. Cal tapped his fingers on the desk, each thud echoing like a death knell. The Xylaris wanted answers yesterday, but Cal had learned that rushing science was like trying to persuade a cat to do tricks, useless and often resulting in scratches. "Adaptability," he muttered, watching the readout on his monitor. "Humans seem to have a knack for it." Like cockroaches, but with more attitude. The door hissed open and Click slid in, his presence like the shadow of a particularly unpleasant cloud. "Progress report, Doctor." "You're looking at it," Cal replied, gesturing to the chaos of his workspace, petri dishes strewn about like the aftermath of a particularly unruly party. "I'm knee-deep in human resilience." "It's a real page-turner." Clix's eyes narrowed, his Xylaris patience thinner than a cheap spacesuit. "Need I remind you, Dr. Cal, that the Council expects results?" "Results, right," Cal replied, rubbing his temples. "I'll be sure to mail them a postcard the moment they arrive." Clix was the kind of guy who made dentists seem fun. Relentless, humorless, and just a tad too enthusiastic about prodding things with needles. He regarded Cal with the silent disdain of a man who knew the value of a well-timed airlock malfunction. "I'm seeing if stress triggers any special behavior patterns," Cal continued, his voice dripping with faux enthusiasm. "Turns out, humans are remarkably good at surviving under pressure." Who'd have thought? Clix didn't deign to answer, mostly because he was too busy making Cal regret his career choices with one withering glare. "Your methods had better prove effective." "Right, effective," Cal nodded. "Well, I'm off to poke more humans, for science." As he turned back to his instruments, Clix departed, leaving an aura of dissatisfaction behind like an invisible bad smell. Cal sighed. Xylaris' ambitions were as lofty as their sense of humor was non-existent, and twice as likely to cause headaches. Meanwhile, Mira Thane was up to her elbows in a different kind of research, namely, the Xylaris database. Having finally pried open the system with the subtlety of a sledgehammer, she discovered something peculiar, an archive dedicated to an ancient human practice: dance. Mira cocked an eyebrow, intrigued. Dance, huh, maybe they're judging us on our rhythm now. Scrolling through the files, she found video feeds of humans performing intricate movements, faces etched with focus and determination. For a moment, she forgot the cell around her, lost in the fluidity and grace captured on the screen. Looks like they recorded these right before the world went to hell, she mused. I'd feel sorry for them if it wasn't so damn useful. From what she could piece together, the Xylaris had a vested interest in this ancient art form. Perhaps they hoped to learn something about human coordination or social bonding. Mira shrugged. She was more interested in what she could learn. Her cell, with its Spartan charm, offered little room, but Mira was nothing if not inventive. She cleared a space and began mimicking the movements, her limbs slowly learning the dance. It was therapeutic, almost like meditation, except instead of peace, she sought a way out. Who knew dancing could be a way to freedom? She chuckled, twisting and turning, her steps gaining confidence with each repetition. If this is what it takes to escape, then so be it. As she practiced, a plan began to form in her mind, a way to use this newfound skill to her advantage. The Xylaris, with their rigid thinking, might never see it coming. Mira knew adapting was key, like a chameleon in a disco ball shop. Plus, it made the boredom bearable. Her cell's surveillance camera hummed quietly, oblivious to her intentions. The Xylaris overseer watching would probably dismiss her movements as insanity, a common enough conclusion when dealing with rebellious humans. But Mira knew better. She was crafting a weapon, one step at a time. In the lab, Cal's experiments crawled along at a snail's pace. He'd managed to get a few humans into his testing chamber, a cold, sterile room that was about as welcoming as cliques at a tea party. His subjects, Mira conspicuously absent, displayed their knack for survival every time he ramped up the pressure. Fascinating creatures, Cal muttered as one subject. A wiry man with a penchant for defiance continued to resist. Too stupid to quit, too stubborn to die. The human glared at him through the glass. You can keep poking us, Doc, but you're not gonna get what you want, Cal smirked. Oh, I'm getting exactly what I want. I just don't know what that is yet. Resistance hadn't waned, even in the face of Xylaris methods designed to crush it. If anything, each new obstacle only seemed to harden the human's resolve, fanning the flames of rebellion. It was gloriously frustrating. Clix, who'd wandered back in probably because he had nothing better to do, observed the proceedings with his usual disdain. Progress, Dr. Cal considered lying, but decided Clix wasn't worth the creativity. If by progress you mean humans still refusing to roll over and die, then yes. The Xylaris overseer curled his lip. Then proceed. Perhaps soon they will see the futility of resistance. Yeah, Cal chuckled darkly. And maybe I'll get elected president of the universe. Both equally likely. Back in her cell, Mira continued her dance, the movements becoming second nature. The Xylaris database didn't just contain traditional dances. She'd found combat styles masked as art. The Xylaris probably overlooked it as a quaint human eccentricity, but to Mira, it was a revelation. Keep underestimating us, she murmured, executing a particularly challenging spin. It makes the moment I kick your ass so much sweeter. She'd never been a fan of dances. Awkward high school proms saw to that, but this was different. This was survival wrapped in a veneer of culture. And the Xylaris, with their obsession over data and control, had handed her the keys to the car. Mira grinned as she imagined the chaos she could unleash. What was dance, after all, but perfectly controlled chaos? It was rhythm and rebellion, art and anarchy, everything the Xylaris despised in one convenient package. As she ended her routine with a flourish, Mira felt a surge of confidence. The base was still on high alert from the breach, but they wouldn't expect this. If she could time it right, the dance would become her secret weapon, a means to disrupt their precious order. For now, though, it was just her in the cell, the dance a quiet rebellion against the silence. She would wait, bide her time, and when the moment was right, she'd show them what a human could do. After all, Mira figured, if you have to fight for your life, you might as well look good doing it. Cal, meanwhile, mused over the latest batch of data. The Xylaris were eager for breakthroughs, but Cal found himself at an impasse. The human capacity to adapt was as enigmatic as ever, laughter often their answer to pain. The lab was quiet, save for the hum of machinery and the occasional distant rumble of the ongoing skirmishes. Cal leaned back in his chair, eyes closing for a brief moment of respite. The research base was a grind, each day blending into the next, a relentless pursuit of answers to questions that seemed to multiply like tribbles. Maybe I've been looking at this all wrong, he mused aloud. Maybe what makes humans tick isn't what they do, it's what they refuse to do, like roll over and die. Mira's voice echoed in his head, a phantom that refused to be exorcised. Doctor. Cal chuckled softly to himself, picturing her in her cell, likely plotting something nefarious. She was trouble wrapped in a mystery, garnished with a side of sarcasm, and that made her his favorite test subject. As the day dragged on, Cal's respect for the human spirit only grew. Like weeds, they thrived under the most adverse conditions, spitting in the face of inevitability. It was aggravatingly inspiring, a reminder that perhaps there was more to life than the Xylaris' sterile pursuit of efficiency. Maybe it's time to take a page from their book, he thought, twirling a pen like a baton. After all, when in Rome, the alarms blared again, a reminder that peace was as fleeting as a politician's promise. Cal glanced at the screens, which showed the base's defenses under siege. The resistance was relentless, a testament to the sheer bullheadedness of the human race. Well, isn't this exciting, he muttered, pulling up another batch of data. The Xylaris soldiers were mobilizing, their dedication to duty as admirable as it was misguided. Mira's plan was in motion, though Cal didn't know it, but a nagging feeling in the back of his mind told him she was involved, one way or another. There were only so many humans with enough gall to poke the proverbial bear. You better have a plan, Mira, Cal whispered to himself, because it's going to get ugly. Little did he know, Mira was already 3 steps ahead, her dance a prelude to the storm she was about to unleash upon the Xylaris. The Xylaris research base was, in Mira Thane's humble opinion, the architectural equivalent of a migraine, monotonous, gray, and designed to make anyone trapped inside deeply question their life choices, or the lack thereof. As Dr. Varen Cal's experiments cranked up another notch, she could almost feel the walls closing in like a cheap sci-fi cliché. Humans were a stubborn bunch, but even the sturdiest stone cracks under enough pressure. The lab's sterile air practically crackled with tension, electrocuting the souls of those unlucky enough to be within reach. Cal was in his usual spot, behind a console that looked like it had been cobbled together by someone with a fetish for blinking lights and pointlessly complex interfaces. He leaned over, squinting at the latest data as if staring hard enough might make it less baffling. Well, that's new, he muttered, scribbling notes with the enthusiasm of a death row inmate filling out a crossword puzzle. His subjects weren't faring much better. The experiments, if you could call them that, were taking a toll. Eyes that had once glinted with defiance were now ringed with exhaustion, the spark of rebellion dimmed but not yet extinguished. They were survivors, yes, but even survivors have limits. Mira, however, had found an unlikely ally in her dance. Each practiced step, each fluid motion, was a tiny rebellion, a screw you to the Xylaris and their iron grip. The dance was becoming more than just an escape. It was a lifeline, binding the captives together in a silent pact of defiance. You look like you've seen better days, Mira said to one of her fellow captives, a woman who'd once had the audacity to spit in Clix's face. An admirable, if not terribly bright, move. Can't imagine why, the woman replied, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Her name was Della, and she'd earned a reputation as the group's unofficial morale officer, mostly by making inappropriate jokes at the worst possible times. Maybe you should try dancing, Mira suggested, executing a particularly elegant turn. It's not just for bored housewives and awkward weddings anymore, Della snorted, a sound that was more human than anything else in the sterile, metallic confines of the base. Right, because having 2 left feet is clearly what we need right now. But hey, if it keeps you sane. I don't know about sane, Mira replied, but it sure as hell beats staring at these walls until they start talking back. Dr. Cal, ever the unobservant one, finally noticed the peculiar activity in Mira's cell through his monitor. He watched, intrigued, as Mira's movements became more elaborate, more refined. It was mesmerizing in a way that suggested more than a simple hobby. What's she up to now? He wondered aloud, tapping a pen against his chin. Our little dancer in the dark. He couldn't help but be curious. The dance seemed to do more for the humans than his so-called scientific methods ever could. There was a connection forming, one he couldn't quite explain but was nonetheless undeniable. Mira wasn't just dancing, she was leading, and others were beginning to follow. In the hall outside, Click slithered past like a disgruntled lizard, his scales reflecting the cold light with all the warmth of an open grave. He paused by Cal's station, his curiosity piqued. Is this what passes for human entertainment? He asked, gesturing to the screen where Mira was performing. I fail to see the appeal, Cal shrugged. It's not really about appeal, is it? Humans have always found ways to cope with the absurdity of their existence. Sometimes it's booze, sometimes it's bad reality TV, and sometimes, apparently, it's dancing. Clix's expression twisted into what might have been confusion. And this helps them, seems to, Cal replied, which, considering your usual methods, is probably the most effective therapy they've had in months. A derisive snort escaped Clix's nostrils. Your sense of humor is as baffling as your research. That's what keeps you coming back for more, right? Cal shot back with a grin that was more grimace. Back in the cells, Mira's impromptu dance sessions had become a communal activity, a strange ritual in their shared captivity. Sure, most of them looked about as graceful as a drunken elephant, but there was a unity in their clumsy movements, a shared understanding that transcended their dire circumstances. Just think, Della quipped one evening, gasping for breath after yet another round of Mira's twisted choreography. If we ever get out of here, we'll have the world's most niche talent show act. Mira laughed, a genuine sound that echoed through the bleak corridors. Yes, the imprisoned human shuffle is bound to be a hit. Always knew I had a calling. They shared a moment of levity, a precious commodity in a place designed to bleed hope dry. It was these moments that kept them going when the world outside seemed determined to snuff them out. Meanwhile, Cal found himself increasingly vexed by his growing fascination with Mira's little revolution. He couldn't help but admire the defiance, even as he was supposed to be cataloging it. There was something primal at work, something that couldn't be quantified on a chart or graph. He watched the footage again, noting each subtle shift in the human's mood, the way their expressions softened as they embraced the dance. It was a glimpse of humanity that the Xylaris, with all their pomp and circuitry, would never understand. Maybe, Cal mused, the key to understanding humans isn't in what they do, but in what they love. It was a radical thought, especially in a world where emotions were liabilities, but radical was exactly what he needed. The base was a pressure cooker, and the steam was starting to whistle through the cracks. If the Xylaris didn't start paying attention, they were going to have one hell of a mess on their hands. And Mira was just getting started. As the weeks dragged on, the experiments continued, but the dance had become an integral part of the captive's routine. Mira's movements were no longer just hers. They were a part of something larger, a symphony of defiance in 3/4 time. The Xylaris, for all their technological superiority, had made one fatal error, underestimating the power of unity. Dr. Cal observed the changes with equal parts awe and frustration. The humans were adapting in ways he hadn't anticipated, drawing strength from each other in a way that defied the Xylaris calculations. It was a beautiful inconvenience, a living contradiction to everything the base was supposed to accomplish. He could feel the tension in the air, like a taut wire ready to snap. The Xylaris were growing impatient, their demands for results as relentless as ever. But Cal had nothing concrete to offer them, just an endless stream of data that refused to conform to their expectations. And Mira, well, she was plotting something. That much was obvious. Her dance had become more than just a pastime. It was a weapon, honed and deadly, and she wielded it with a grace that belied its true purpose. Cal couldn't deny his admiration. Mira was a force of nature, a storm in human form, and she was about to unleash hell on the Xylaris, whether they were ready or not. In the dim light of her cell, Mira plotted her next move. The dance had given her perspective, a clarity that cut through the noise and chaos of captivity. She knew the base's rhythms now, its strengths and weaknesses, and she knew how to exploit them. It was time. The captives gathered, their faces a sea of determination and resolve. They were weary, yes, but their spirits were unbroken. Mira looked at them, her heart swelling with pride and defiance. Tonight, she said, her voice steady and unwavering, we show them what we're made of. The plan was simple, as all the best ones are. Distraction, chaos, and escape. The dance would be their cover, a ruse to draw attention away from their true objective. It was risky, but the best plans always were. As they prepared, Mira felt a thrill of adrenaline, a reminder of what it meant to be alive. They were going to make history or die trying, and either way they'd go out swinging. Dr. Cal watched from his station, his heart pounding with a mix of excitement and dread. He knew what Mira was planning, or at least he had a good guess. And while he couldn't interfere directly, he felt a strange compulsion to aid her in whatever way he could. Perhaps it was scientific curiosity, or perhaps it was something more. Either way, Cal was about to find out just how far he was willing to go for the sake of discovery. The night was still, the calm before the storm. As the captives began their dance, the base seemed to hold its breath, sensing the shift in the air. And then, with a final, triumphant flourish, Mira led her fellow captives into the fray. The dance had begun, and there was no turning back. Dr. Varen Cal sat at his console, tapping the pen against his teeth with the rhythm of a metronome on steroids. The Xylaris research base hummed with a sterile efficiency that only proved how far from human understanding these lizard-like overseers truly were. Somewhere in the labyrinth of gray corridors, a shuffling clamor echoed. It was Mira's dance, an ethereal rebellion with steps as defiant as the human's will to endure. Cal report clicks barked, slithering in with all the grace of a brick through a window. His scaly face was a study in perpetual disdain, the kind that suggested he'd seen toilets with more charm than the human population. Ah, clicks. My favorite intergalactic critic, Cal responded, spinning in his chair with enough sarcasm to power a small starship. Mira's at it again, dancing up a storm in her cell. I think she's aiming for an intergalactic record. Your humor is as misplaced as your results, Clicks sneered, his eyes flicking to the monitor. Mira spun in her cell, movements fluid and precise. Explain to me why this primitive expression of awkwardness is permitted. It's not all about the numbers, you know, Cal replied, his eyes fixed on Mira. Humans have this annoying habit of connecting to each other. It's a wonder, really, like watching ants figure out a way around the magnifying glass. Clicks's unimpressed stare could have sired milk. The council demands progress, doctor. They grow impatient. Your work is under scrutiny. Oh, they're watching. Fantastic. Just what I need, more cooks in the kitchen. Next, they'll be telling me how to mix chemicals. Clicks's mouth twisted into a semblance of a smile, the kind that would make a crocodile proud. Your sarcasm is noted. Results are the only currency. Fail, and you'll find out just how little patience the Xylaris have for incompetence. Cal leaned back, feigning a yawn. We'll get there, Clicks. Good science takes time. Bad science, well, he waved toward the rows of blinking lights, takes Xylaris oversight. With a final derisive snort, Clicks exited, leaving a trail of tension thick enough to trip over. Cal watched him go, resisting the urge to flip the bird at his retreating form. Instead, he turned back to the monitor where Mira's dance continued, an electric pulse against the base's dreary heartbeat. Asterisk, you think they'd just let us go if we asked nicely, Della quipped as she tried to follow Mira's lead, her limbs flailing in a way that suggested she'd missed her calling as a windmill. If only Mira replied, not missing a beat. Her movements were sharp, purposeful. But then, where would they get their entertainment? Della snorted. I'd suggest a sitcom, but apparently our suffering's more compelling. The ratings must be through the roof, ushering the group into another round of coordinated chaos. Mira felt the rhythm pick up. The dance was evolving, growing in complexity. It was more than movement, it was a rebellion with tempo, and with every step it seemed to be affecting the very fabric of their prison. Something's happening, Mira murmured, the dance almost a whisper in her muscles. The lights flickered above, a stutter in the Xylaris technological symphony, as if the bass itself was holding its breath. Ah, finally, my groove is so bad it's breaking things, Della said with a grin, wiping sweat from her brow. Mira shook her head. No, seriously, I think we're onto something. This, she gestured vaguely at the flickering lights, isn't just us, it's the bass. Della raised an eyebrow. So what? We dance our way out of here. Can't wait to see that on a motivational poster. I'm serious, Mira insisted. Something about the rhythm, it's disrupting things. We can use this, fantastic. We'll just add techno-sabotage to our resumes when we get out. Mira smirked, the glint of determination in her eyes brightening. Damn right we will, asterisk back in his lab, doctor. Cal pored over his notes, the dance replaying on the monitor in a loop that bordered on obsession. The data was evolving, changing in ways that defied Xylaris logic. Their technology, so advanced it made human gadgets look like stone knives, was having hiccups, all thanks to a little rhythm and defiance. Interesting, Cal mused, scribbling furiously. The base had never been designed for this kind of variable. Emotions, unity, they weren't in the Xylaris lexicon. But here, amid the monotony and despair, humanity's stubborn spark was throwing a wrench in the works. He leaned back, a wry smile tugging at his lips. Dance, you magnificent bastards. Dance. The Xylaris wanted results, and fast. Their patience was a candle in a hurricane, flickering and fragile, but Cal knew better than to rush. The dance was a variable he hadn't considered, one the Xylaris had missed entirely, and in that oversight lay an opportunity, a chance to turn the tables. The next few weeks were a blur of activity, the demands from the Xylaris increasing with each passing day. Clicks's visits grew more frequent, his tone more menacing, but Cal had come to expect it, even relish it in a masochistic sort of way. The pressure was mounting, the perfect storm brewing in the heart of the base. Mira and her fellow captives continued their dance, each step a defiant clockwork in the machine of rebellion. The flickering lights became a familiar sight, the glitches more pronounced. Cal could feel the tension simmering beneath the surface, ready to explode. Careful, Mira, he whispered to the monitor, as if she could hear him. You're poking a dragon, asterisk, just another day in paradise, Della muttered, slumping against the cold metal wall of her cell. I always wanted to be a human glitch in the Matrix. Mira laughed, the sound a bright note in the drab surroundings. Better than being a Xylaris lab rat. At least this way, we're making them work for it. True, Della agreed, and the view's to die for. Literally, Mira shook her head, stretching her limbs. The dance had become second nature now, a routine as essential as breathing. But it was more than exercise. It was a weapon, a way to fight back against the overwhelming odds. All right, everyone, Mira called, gathering the attention of the other captives. You know the drill, just like we practiced. We're going to turn up the heat. Finally, a chance to really impress our alien overlords, Della said with a grin. They'll be begging to sign us for a tour across the galaxy. The dance began, a synchronized rebellion that pulsed through the base, each step causing a ripple in the Xylaris technology. The lights flickered, the machinery stuttered, and somewhere, a siren blared in confusion. This is it, Mira thought, her heart pounding in her chest. This is how we win. In the control room, Cal watched the chaos unfold with a mixture of dread and exhilaration. The Xylaris wouldn't stand idly by, not with their precious technology being disrupted. But this was their chance, the opportunity that Mira and the others had been waiting for. He knew what he had to do. As the dance reached its crescendo, the base was thrown into disarray. Alarms blared, lights flickered wildly, and the Xylaris scrambled to regain control. It was beautiful chaos, a masterstroke of defiance that Mira orchestrated with precision. Dr. Cal moved quickly, navigating the corridors with a purpose that belied his usual lackadaisical demeanor. The captives had given him the opening he needed, and he wasn't about to let it slip through his fingers. Cal, Clix's voice boomed over the intercom, tinged with the kind of panic that suggested his scales were in a twist. What is happening? Technical difficulties, Cal replied, his voice dripping with mock concern. It seems your state-of-the-art facility isn't quite up to snuff. This is unacceptable, Clix roared. Address the situation or face the consequences. Cal smirked, feeling the adrenaline course through his veins. Don't worry, Clix, I've got it all under control. The truth was he had no idea what he was doing, but he had Mira, and in that moment it was enough. The humans continued their dance, the rhythm a beacon in the darkness. They moved with a confidence that bordered on arrogance, each step a testament to their resilience. It was a sight to behold, a moment that transcended the bleakness of their situation. And then, just as the tension reached its peak, Mira led the group into the final movement, a flourish of defiance that shattered the Xylaris hold. Cal watched from his console, his heart in his throat. Come on, he whispered, urging them on. Make it count. The dance drew to a close, the last notes hanging in the air like a promise. The base was silent, the machinery still, and in that moment the captives knew they had won a battle, even if the war was far from over. Mira turned to her fellow captives, a triumphant smile on her face. We did it, she said, voice trembling with the weight of their victory. Della grinned, her eyes shining with pride. Damn right we did. Now let's blow this popsicle stand. As the sirens blared once more, the humans moved with a purpose, their spirits unbroken. They were ready to face whatever came next, united in their defiance. And Dr. Cal, watching from the shadows, knew that the true experiment had only just begun. Dr. Varen Cal leaned against the cold console, staring at the line of monitors like a gambler down to his last chip. Mira's dance replayed in glitchy loops, the once defiant rhythm now a haunting reminder of how quickly things could go sideways. The Xylaris had known something was up. They weren't blind, just blinkered by their arrogance. Dr. Cal, Clix's reptilian voice cut through the air like a rusty knife. If Cal had learned anything, it was that nothing good ever followed that tone. Ah, Clix, to what do I owe the displeasure? Cal spun the chair around, feigning nonchalance. Are we finally upgrading the detention-grade coffee, or maybe adding a splash of misery to the water supply? Clix's scales rustled with a mix of irritation and superiority. The Council is aware of the anomalies in the base's systems. Such failures are intolerable. Failures, Cal chuckled. I prefer spontaneous technical innovation, keeps you on your toes. Clix's eyes narrowed, a chilling gleam about them. The dance has been discovered. Surveillance is being increased. You will ensure compliance or face consequences. Cal's stomach twisted. Yeah, about that. You ever try stopping a human from dancing? It's like trying to stop water with a sieve. Then plug the holes, doctor. Clix hissed, then left with a flick of his tail, the promise of dire consequences lingering like a bad hangover. In the dim confines of their shared cell, Mira sat with the remnants of her rebellion. The dancers were huddled around, their previous spark dampened by the heavy blanket of surveillance. Cameras were everywhere now, a digital panopticon where wry smiles used to be. Well, this sucks, Della muttered, tossing a pebble across the floor. It clattered into the wall, the sound echoing in the too-quiet room. If I wanted an audience, I'd have gone viral on Earth. Mira sighed, the weight of their cage pressing down like lead. We're not done, Della, not yet, we just need a new plan, Della scoffed, her sarcasm undimmed by despair. What are we gonna do, tap dance our way through Xylaris security? They expect us to give up, Mira said, her voice firm despite the doubt gnawing at her insides. So we don't. The group was silent, the flickering light casting long shadows of uncertainty. Hope was a fragile thing, easily snuffed out by the cold, clinical efficiency of their jailers. But in Mira's eyes there was still a flicker, a stubborn ember refusing to die. So what? Della asked, her voice edged with a brittle hope. We're just supposed to wait around and hope they trip over their tails. No, Mira replied. We find a way to trip them ourselves. Back in his lab, Cal was facing his own set of troubles. The Xylaris had ramped up pressure like it was on clearance. His notes were scattered across the console, pages filled with scribbles that promised salvation or damnation. He wasn't sure which yet. Trying to solve the mysteries of the universe or just doodling, he muttered to himself, examining the erratic spikes on the monitor. The dance Mira's dance was the key, but now that the Xylaris were watching, any wrong move could be their last. The intercom crackled to life again, Clix's voice a constant reminder that things could always get worse. "Progress report, Doctor. Progress. Let's see," Cal said, crossing his arms. "I've learned Xylaris security is about as effective as a chocolate teapot. We are not amused," Clix snapped, his icy calm threatening to fracture. "Well, I am," Cal shot back, though his bravado felt as thin as paper. "But hey, give it time. Even the Titanic had a plan." There was a pause, a moment where the only sound was the hum of machinery. Cal knew he was walking a tightrope, but better to fall from a height than to slowly drown in the Xylaris expectations. "You will deliver, Doctor," Clix commanded, the line going dead with a finality that left Cal gripping the console like a lifeline. "Deliver what?" Cal asked the silence. "Pizza." A miracle, the Xylaris had made their demands clear, and for once Cal found himself regretting his usual flair for sarcasm. With Mira's dance clipped by surveillance, he needed a new angle, a way to work the human resilience magic without drawing a giant punish me sign on his back. The atmosphere in the cell was tense. The walls seemed closer, the ceiling lower, as if the base itself was trying to squeeze the fight out of them. Della sprawled on her cot, one arm draped over her eyes. "Hey Mira, remember when this was just supposed to be a short-term gig? Room, board, and all the existential dread you could eat," she said, her voice muffled but sharp as ever. "Good times," Mira replied, trying to inject some levity into her tone. "But hey, at least we didn't die of boredom." "Yet," Della added. "There's still time." Mira stood, pacing the small space, her thoughts a tangled mess. The dance was their weapon, but the Xylaris had stolen it from them. She needed something else, something new, something they wouldn't see coming. "What about a distraction?" one of the other captives suggested, his voice hesitant. "We cause a ruckus, draw security, and then—" "What? We moonwalk our way past them," Della suggested, earning a tired laugh from the group. "No," Mira said, stopping in her tracks. "But he's right. We can distract them, but with what?" The question hung in the air, as heavy as the Xylaris grip. The other captives looked at each other, uncertainty reflected in their eyes. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble in a game where the house never lost. "What about the glitches?" Mira asked, the kernel of an idea forming. "If we can trigger them again, maybe we can short out their systems just long enough." "Playing with fire," Della said, her grin a shade more genuine. "I like it. Playing with fire's all we've got left," Mira replied, determination settling over her like armor. "Let's make it burn." Cal was neck-deep in data, fingers flying over the console as he tried to make sense of the chaos. The anomalies were still there, just beneath the surface, a storm waiting to break. If he could just harness it, amplify the disruptions like a conductor leading a very angry orchestra. "Dr. Cal," Clix's voice broke through his thoughts, the digital equivalent of nails on a chalkboard. "You are running out of time. Join the club," Cal muttered. But the comment was more to himself than to Clix. "Look, I'm working on it, okay? Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither is whatever it is you're asking for. You will succeed," Clix insisted, his voice a sibilant command that brooked no argument. "And if I don't?" Cal asked, though he already knew the answer. Failure wasn't an option, not if he wanted to keep his insides inside. "Then you will find out what failure truly means," Clix replied, his tone as soft and dangerous as a blade in the dark. Cal sighed as the intercom went dead again. "No pressure," he said to the empty room. "Just my life and a couple dozen others on the line." As usual, still, the anomalies flickered on his screen, a mute testament to the potential for rebellion. The captive's dance had been more than just a show of defiance, it was a catalyst. If he could find the right frequency, the right sequence. "Here's hoping you dancers are still wearing your lucky socks," he muttered, diving back into his calculations. In the cell, Mira and the others were gearing up for their next performance. Not a dance this time, but a high-stakes game of how much chaos can we cause before they shut us down. "I feel like I'm cramming for a final exam I didn't sign up for," Della said, cracking her knuckles. "And the teacher's a lizard with a grudge. Think of it as an opportunity to shine," Mira replied, trying to muster enthusiasm. "Xylaris won't know what hit them." "Yes, well, let's hope they don't hit back too hard," Della said, casting a wary glance at the ever-watchful cameras. The plan was simple, if not a little insane. Trigger the glitches, cause enough confusion to slip through the cracks, and pray that Cal was on the other end with whatever Deus Ex Machina he could pull out of his lab coat. "All right, guys," Mira said, taking a deep breath. "Let's make some noise." The group nodded, determination etched on their faces. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble in a game where the stakes were as high as they come. But it was a chance, and that was more than they'd had yesterday. As the captives moved into position, Mira felt the familiar tingle of adrenaline, the electric hum of possibility beneath her skin. They might not have been able to dance, but they could still fight, still resist in their own way. "Ready?" she asked, meeting Della's gaze. "Born ready," Della replied, flashing a grin that was all teeth and defiance. They set to work, their actions synchronized in a way that spoke to months of shared imprisonment. Each movement was precise, purposeful, aimed at sowing chaos within the Xylaris' meticulously ordered world. The glitches began small, flickering lights, stuttering machinery, but slowly built to a crescendo of malfunction. Mira watched as the cameras began to blink erratically, the once omniscient eyes of the Xylaris now blinded by their own technology. "Now," Mira shouted, her voice cutting through the confusion. The cell door slid open with a hesitant groan, and the captives surged forward, a wave of humanity crashing against the sterile walls of their prison. It wasn't freedom, not yet, but it was a start. "Keep moving," Della yelled, her voice barely audible over the chaos. "Don't stop until we're out." The corridors twisted and turned, a labyrinth designed to confuse and disorient. But Mira had spent enough time trapped within these walls to know them like the back of her hand. She led the way, her heart pounding in time with the frantic beat of their escape. As they rounded a corner, the lights flickered one last time before plunging the hallway into darkness. "Hope you know where you're going," Della called, her footsteps echoing wildly. "Trust me," Mira replied, though she wasn't sure if she was convincing herself or Della. "I've got this." The group pressed on, the sounds of pursuit growing ever closer. It was a race against time, a desperate sprint toward the possibility of freedom. And somewhere in the heart of the chaos, Dr. Cal worked frantically, his fingers dancing across the console as he tried to keep the fragile spark of rebellion alive. "Just a little longer," he whispered, willing the universe to give him and the humans just one more chance. As Mira led the captives through the twisting hallways, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was it, the moment they'd been waiting for. Whether they'd succeed or fail, this was their chance to be more than just prisoners, to be something greater than what the Xylaris had reduced them to. "Don't look back," Mira said, her voice a fierce whisper. "We're almost there." With every step, with every beat of their hearts, they forged a path forward, defying the odds stacked against them. They were human, flawed, stubborn, and relentless, and in that moment it was enough. Dr. Varen Cal stared at the monitor, the greenish glow making his face look like he'd already turned into one of the damned lizards, which, he mused, might actually get him out of the Xylaris research base. Maybe if he started shedding skin, they'd assume he was one of their long-lost cousins and politely ask him to leave. He chuckled grimly to himself. "Yeah, right, more like they'd dissect me just to be sure." The anomalies were all over the place, like a drunken spider's web, and the dance, oh, the dance, was still a thorn in the Xylaris' side. If only he could harness it, like one might harness a very angry horse with a penchant for kicking. It was supposed to be poetry in motion, but right now, it was more like a toddler's finger painting, chaotic, confusing, and occasionally impressive despite itself. "Progress, Doctor." Clix's voice slithered through the intercom, as warm and inviting as a snake in your sleeping bag. "Making strides," Cal said, spinning his chair to face the monitor, hoping the data might magically rearrange itself into something useful. "Although they're more baby steps than anything. You must do better," Clix insisted, and Cal could almost picture the reptilian scales bristling. "Failure is not tolerated." "Well, it's not celebrated either, trust me," Cal replied, rubbing his temples. "Can I at least get a participation trophy for trying?" "You have until the next cycle," Clix said, and the line went dead, leaving Cal to stew in his own frustration and latent cowardice. "Great," he muttered to himself, turning back to his work. "Better start drafting my eulogy." His fingers danced over the console, tapping out commands as he tried to pinpoint the source of the anomalies and how he might use them to his advantage. If he was going to play Pied Piper, he'd need a damned good tune. In the shared cell, Mira was rallying the troops, which in this case involved trying to convince a bunch of tired, scared humans that disrupting a highly advanced alien race was a good idea. "All right, folks," she called, clapping her hands to gather attention. "I know things look grim. But we've got something they don't: heart, soul, and the ability to dance like nobody's watching. Except they are definitely watching," Della pointed out, glancing at the cameras with a mix of disdain and weariness. "All the time, more than I'd like to think about." "True," Mira conceded with a shrug, "but what if we gave them something to really watch? Something they can't control or predict." "You mean like a dance?" one of the other captives asked, a hint of hope in his voice. "Exactly," Mira said, nodding. "If we time it right, we can cause a hell of a distraction. Cal's working on something, we just need to give him the opening." "And what happens if we don't make it?" Della asked, her voice tinged with both skepticism and curiosity. Well, best case we get a dance party. Worst case we get an early retirement, Mira replied, grinning. Win-win, really. A chuckle passed through the group, a small ripple of camaraderie in the face of an ocean of uncertainty. They needed this, Mira realized. Needed to feel like they were part of something bigger, even if it was just a grand scheme to poke the Xylaris in the eye. Look, Mira continued, I can't promise it'll work, but I can promise that doing nothing will definitely get us nowhere. Della nodded, her expression softening. All right, I'm in, but only if you promise not to use the word teamwork like a motivational speaker. Deal, Mira laughed, extending her hand. Della took it, and the other captives followed suit, a makeshift pact forged in the crucible of shared desperation. Here's to making history, someone said, and Mira smiled, feeling the faint ember of hope ignite in her chest. Or at least a footnote, she said. All right, people, let's give them a show. Back at the lab, Cal was knee-deep in algorithms, trying to create something that would make the Xylaris heads spin, if they even had heads under those helmets. He'd never actually checked and had zero desire to find out. If I were a glitch, he mused, tapping his chin, where would I hide? His eyes darted over the screen, searching for patterns, for something, anything that could give them an edge. If the dance had caused the glitches before, it could do it again, but he needed to figure out the why and the how. Think, Cal, he muttered. Think like a dancer, not a scientist. He closed his eyes, picturing the dance, the way movement flowed into movement, the rhythm, the sheer unpredictability of it. It was like trying to catch water with your bare hands, slippery, elusive, but with just the right touch. His eyes snapped open. The glitches weren't random, they were beat-specific. Each anomaly was triggered by a particular sequence of movements, a rhythm only humans could create. Gotcha, he said, feeling a surge of triumph. Now, he just had to sync the sequence with the basis systems and amplify the effect. Easy as pie, if pie involved quantum mathematics and a potential death sentence. He set to work, his mind a flurry of calculations and code, fingers flying as he programmed the basis systems to respond to the dancer's rhythm. Here's hoping you lot have been paying attention to your choreography, he murmured, tweaking the final settings. Or we're all toast. With the program set, he just needed to align it with the timing of the dance, a perfectly timed symphony of chaos. One chance to make it work. Back in the shared cell, Mira and the others were rehearsing their plan. The atmosphere was tense, but beneath it lay a simmering excitement, a rebellious thrill of sticking it to their captors. Okay, remember, Mira said, addressing the group. We've got to stick to the rhythm, just like we practiced. If we get it right, it'll trigger the anomalies and give Cal the opening he needs. And if we don't, someone asked, voice quivering just slightly. Then we get an angry lecture from a very disappointed lizard, Mira said, grinning. Or worse, a Xylaris dance-off. More laughter, albeit nervous and tinged with fear, but laughter nonetheless. It was a sound Mira hadn't heard nearly enough of recently, and it buoyed her spirits. We can do this, she said, her voice firm. This is our chance to fight back, even if it's just with dance steps. The group nodded, determination etched into their faces. They were ready as they would ever be in this foreign, sterile hellhole. Let's make it count, Della said, her voice a low whisper. Showtime, Mira agreed, feeling the adrenaline surge through her veins. As the music, an amalgamation of alien tones and rhythms, filtered through the cell's speakers, the captives fell into formation. They moved as one, each step, each gesture in perfect synchronicity. The dance was fluid, a testament to their unity, their shared determination to reclaim just a sliver of control. As they danced, Mira felt the familiar rush of freedom, however fleeting, and in that moment she knew that whatever happened, they'd given it their all. The glitches started small, barely noticeable flickers in the lights, but they grew in intensity, the anomalies spreading like wildfire throughout the basis systems. It was working. It was actually working. Keep it up, Mira urged, her voice a fierce whisper as they continued to dance, their movements unlocking the chaos within the Xylaris' carefully controlled environment. The lights above them flickered wildly before plunging the room into darkness. A moment later, emergency lights bathed the corridors in a harsh red glow, casting long shadows that danced along with them. Now or never, Della said, her eyes locked on Mira's. Let's move. The cell door hissed open, and the captives poured into the hallway, a wave of humanity breaking against the sterile walls of their prison. It was chaos, beautiful and terrible all at once. Stick together, Mira called, leading them through the maze of corridors, her heart pounding in time with their frantic escape. Cal's plan was working, but they were still far from safety. The Xylaris would regroup quickly, and the window of opportunity was closing fast. As they wound through the twisting passages, Mira couldn't help but feel a thrill of exhilaration at their defiance. Their unity, their resolve, it was a force to be reckoned with, a testament to the indomitable human spirit. Keep moving, Della shouted, her voice barely audible over the din. They pressed on, the sound of pursuit growing ever closer, but Mira refused to give in to fear. They had come too far to turn back now. Almost there, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. The captives followed her, their steps sure despite the uncertainty that lay ahead. Together they forged a path through the darkness, driven by hope and desperation, determined to seize the chance they'd been given. As they neared the exit, the flickering lights cast strange shadows on the walls, transforming the once sterile corridors into a surreal, shifting landscape. It was a fitting backdrop for their rebellion, a testament to their defiance in the face of impossible odds. "Don't look back," Mira said, her voice fierce with determination. "We're almost there." With every step, they carved a path forward, refusing to be cowed by the challenges that lay ahead. They were human, flawed, stubborn, and relentless, and in that moment they were more than enough. The Xylaris inspection teams were about as welcome as a plague of space locusts, and twice as irritating. They swept through the research base like they owned the place, which, in fairness, they kind of did. Today, however, their visit was more about ensuring their overgrown ant farm wasn't plotting any rebellious dance numbers. The Xylaris, with their unnervingly smooth helmets and what Cal suspected were judgmental glares, had no idea that today was the day they'd get a show to remember. One for the history books, or at least for a poorly written tabloid. Dr. Varen Cal, ever the picture of a disheveled genius, was juggling 3 screens at once in the control room. His mood was somewhere between mildly anxious and oh shit. Clicks, the scaly intercom nuisance, crackled to life in his ear. "Dr. Cal, the Xylaris inspection team is en route." "Prepare to present your progress," Clicks said, voice like sandpaper on glass. "Progress," Cal muttered, furiously typing. "Sure, just give me a sec to invent a miracle. You would be advised to expedite," Clicks replied with all the warmth of a cryogenic freezer. Cal snorted, shaking his head. If everything went according to plan, and when did it ever, he wouldn't have to worry about impressing the Xylaris much longer. He glanced at the monitor, watching the humans in the shared cell. They were ready, or as ready as one could be for an impromptu dance-off against an alien regime. Back in the shared cell, Mira and her ragtag troupe were psyching themselves up for the performance of a lifetime. The room was a mix of nervous energy and grim determination. "All right, let's do this," Mira said, casting a quick glance at the ever-watchful cameras. "Remember, it's not just a dance, it's an existential slap in the face. Or a swift kick in the alien groin," Della added, her grin sharp enough to cut through steel. "Preferably both," Mira agreed, their shared humor a balm against the tension. "We've practiced this more times than any of us wanted." "If we screw up, we're just really bad dancers. And if we don't," someone asked, trying to keep their voice steady. "If we don't, we're free," Mira said simply. The word hung in the air, tantalizing and almost out of reach. As the Xylaris inspection team arrived, the captives' performance began. The music, a bizarre alien concoction with a beat so infectious it was practically a biohazard, filled the cell. The captives moved as one, their dance a symphony of defiance. Cal watched from the control room, his hands flying over the console. The dance was perfect, each step landing with the precision of a military strike. The anomalies started small, just like before, but quickly escalated. Lights flickered, alarms blared, and somewhere a Xylaris technician was probably having a meltdown. "Here we go," Cal muttered, his fingers a blur on the keyboard. Showtime. The dance, synchronized with the base's systems via Cal's modifications, created a field that resonated through the base. Xylaris technology, so dependent on their rigid order, started to crumble under the assault of human creativity and chaos. The inspection team was caught off guard as their gadgets short-circuited, reducing them to ineffectual flapping. It was like watching a flock of robotic penguins trying to fly. Cal almost felt sorry for them. Almost. "Let's see how you like a little chaos," he said, a grin spreading across his face as the Xylaris struggled to regain control. In the shared cell, the dance reached its crescendo. The glitches erupted into a full-blown system failure, leaving the Xylaris scrambling in confusion. The cell doors, designed to withstand any human attempt at escape, slid open with a whisper. "Move, move, move," Mira shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos like a laser. The dancers didn't need to be told twice. They surged into the corridor, adrenaline propelling them forward. Della was at Mira's side, her eyes alight with a thrill that bordered on madness. "You think Cal's plan is actually gonna work? It better," Mira replied, dodging a fallen piece of ceiling. "Or we'll be improvising our way into an early grave." The group moved with a purpose, weaving through the labyrinthine corridors. The base was a cacophony of warning sirens and shouting Xylaris, their usual stoicism shattered by the unprecedented breach. Mira could almost taste freedom, sweet and tantalizing, on the edge of her senses. It was a feeling she'd never thought she'd experience again, but here it was, just a few steps away, and probably guarded by a phalanx of very unhappy Xylaris. "Keep it together," she called, steering them towards the exit Cal had indicated. "We're almost there." The inspection team, now reduced to a gaggle of confused helmet heads, was floundering in the tech apocalypse. Dr. Cal, meanwhile, was having the time of his life. He'd never been much of a dancer, but he knew how to orchestrate a good disaster. "Hey, Clicks," Cal called into the intercom, grinning like a madman. "You seeing this? Guess my progress report's gonna be a bit fiery. You are aware this is a catastrophe," Clicks replied, sounding impressively unfazed. "The council will hold you accountable." "Accountable schmountable," Cal retorted, flipping switches with reckless abandon. "I'm a bit busy saving humanity here." "Maybe send a memo." The intercom went silent, either because Clicks was too stunned to respond or had finally short-circuited from Cal's cheek. The captives reached the exit, a massive bulkhead that had somehow remained operational despite the technological meltdown. Mira punched the control panel, and the door groaned open, revealing the cold, star-speckled expanse of space beyond. "We did it," Della breathed, disbelief mingling with relief. "Don't get too comfy," Mira warned, hustling them through the breach. "We're not out of the woods yet." Beyond the base, a ship, a clunky, battered freighter more rust than metal, waited like a loyal but slightly dysfunctional dog. Cal had cobbled it together from spare parts and sheer determination, and it was their ticket out of this Xylaris-infested hellscape. As they clambered aboard, Mira took a moment to glance back at the base, now a beacon of chaos and shattered order. So much for the perfect alien stronghold. Minutes later, the freighter rumbled to life, systems flickering under the strain of their hurried escape. Cal had somehow managed to beat them there, his grin evident even through the grime and exhaustion. "Nice of you to join the party," Mira said as she slid into the co-pilot's seat. "Couldn't let you have all the fun," Cal replied, tapping at the controls with practiced ease. "Now, let's get the hell out of here before they figure out which way's up." The ship lurched into motion, engines protesting but compliant. As they soared away from the Xylaris base, leaving chaos and confusion in their wake, Mira felt a wild, unfettered laugh escape her lips. "They'd done it. Looks like your plan worked," Della said, settling into a seat with a sigh of relief. "Against all odds," Cal quipped, setting the course for the nearest unoccupied stretch of space. "But let's not make a habit of it, yeah." The freighter slipped into the void, the Xylaris base shrinking into the distance, nothing more than a blip on the radar. Freedom, once a mere fantasy, was now their reality, unpredictable, dangerous, but unmistakably real. "Here's to reckless plans and questionable decisions," Mira said, raising an imaginary glass. Cal chuckled, the sound warm and genuine. "And to sticking it to the Xylaris." As the stars stretched out before them, the reality of their escape set in, a heady mix of euphoria and trepidation. They were free, yes, but freedom was a double-edged sword, especially in a universe that was as cold and indifferent as the Xylaris masks. But for now, they'd savor the victory, however fleeting, and deal with the consequences when they came. After all, if there was one thing humanity excelled at, it was making the best out of a bad situation. "And so the legend begins," Mira said, settling back with a satisfied smirk. "Hopefully not a short story," Cal added, casting a wary eye on the sputtering fuel gauge. With a shared laugh, they sailed into the cosmic unknown, defiant, hopeful, and ready for whatever the universe decided to throw their way next. The freighter's engines hummed, a clunky anthem of victory over the Xylaris. Inside, the humans felt as if they'd just walked out of a particularly nasty dentist appointment, battered and slightly traumatized, but with a newfound appreciation for being toothache-free. Dr. Varen Cal lounged in the pilot's seat, his disheveled genius look more pronounced now that he'd swapped lab coats for a grease-stained flight jacket. He glanced at the various screens in front of him, which were behaving like rebellious teenagers, spitting out data with a flair for the dramatic. "You know," he said, turning to face the rest of the ship's cramped interior, "I always figured escape from an alien base would involve more laser fire and heroic speeches." Della, sprawled in the chair across from him, snorted, "Sorry to disappoint." We left the dramatic monologues back with our dignity. Mira, who was busy checking the ship's pathetic inventory, mostly questionable food rations and a first aid kit from the Jurassic period, leaned back with a sigh. "Yeah, well, at least we didn't have to pretend to be brave while being shot at, although I did have a speech prepared." "Something about sticking it to the alien overlords. That would have been something," Cal replied, his smile as crooked as the ship's flight path. "But speaking of sticking it to them, we need to find somewhere to lay low, preferably somewhere that doesn't have a Xylaris welcome party." Della rubbed her temples, feeling the familiar throb of an oncoming headache. "I've heard good things about deserted asteroids. Plenty of solitude, minimal Xylaris, no neighbors to complain about the music." Mira chuckled, albeit a bit wearily. "As long as they have breathable air and some kind of civilization, I'll take it. What do you say, Cal? Know any good intergalactic hideaways?" Cal leaned back, a thoughtful crease forming on his brow. "There's a place I heard about, a little human settlement on the fringes." They don't ask questions and they're big on the live and let live philosophy. Sounds like paradise, Mira said, or at least a decent place to catch our breath. Well then, Cal said, fingers dancing over the navigation console with more hope than confidence. Set a course for the middle of nowhere it is. As the freighter cruised into the vastness of space, the humans settled into an uneasy calm. It was the first time in a long time that they weren't under the watchful eyes of their Xylaris captors, and it felt strangely alien. Can you believe it? Della said, breaking the silence. We're actually free. Well, as free as you can get when you're hurtling through space in a junkyard special. Mira smiled. It's surreal, right? But I'd take this over another day under those Xylaris helmets any time. The mention of Xylaris helmets brought a new wave of reflection. They'd been prisoners for what felt like an eternity, under constant surveillance and pressure to perform like puppets in a show they hadn't signed up for. But they'd shown them, hadn't they? With nothing but a dance and a heap of stubbornness. We did it because we stuck together, Mira said, her voice holding a note of pride. We used what they couldn't understand, our creativity, our unpredictability. They didn't stand a chance, Della smirked. Turns out we're more dangerous with dance moves than they are with all their fancy tech. Cal looked over, his expression thoughtful. That's the thing about humans, we adapt. We're stubborn, resourceful, and when we're pushed, we push back harder. Yeah, but let's not test that theory too often, Mira said, stretching her legs with a wince. I'd like to enjoy not being a part of someone's twisted science experiment for a while. So, Della said, what do you think the Xylaris are doing right now, crying into their helmets? Filing some intergalactic insurance claim, probably trying to spin this whole thing as some kind of planned exercise, Cal said with a chuckle. Or maybe they'll just blame it on a solar flare. They can blame it on whatever they want, Mira said, her gaze fixed on the stars streaking past. We know the truth. The ship's control consoles beeped, pulling Cal's attention back to the cockpit. He tapped a few keys, frowning at the readouts. Fuel's looking a bit low. We'll need to make a stop sooner rather than later. Great, Della said, from the frying pan to the potential fuel-starved fire. Relax, Cal said, though there was a hint of tension in his voice. I've got a few tricks up my sleeve. We'll make it to the settlement. Mira leaned back, closing her eyes against the hum of the engines. Well, if we're going to run out of fuel, let's at least do it somewhere scenic. The freighter continued its journey, cutting through the emptiness of space with a resilience that mirrored its passengers. They were far from safe and even farther from certain of their future, but for the first time they were the captains of their own fates. So, Della said after a long pause, anyone know how to play cards? Because we've got time and this bucket of bolts isn't exactly equipped with in-flight entertainment. Mira laughed, a sound that felt strangely liberating. Sure, why not? Let's pass the time. And if we end up playing for air, well, may the best human win. As they settled into the routine of their newfound freedom, the Xylaris base they'd escaped from was left grappling with the aftermath. The inspection team, now reduced to analyzing the rubble of their own arrogance, would have plenty to ponder. How had their well-ordered world been turned upside down by a group of humans with nothing but a dance routine? The Xylaris had underestimated the power of human ingenuity and adaptability, a mistake they'd likely not make again. But for now, Mira and her troop would savor their triumph, however fleeting it seemed against the backdrop of their uncertain horizon. In the freighter, as laughter and the shuffling of makeshift cards filled the cabin, it was clear that, for all their flaws and frailties, humans had a knack for finding light in the darkest of places. Even in the vast, unforgiving expanse of space, they carried with them a spark of defiance that no Xylaris technology could ever quench. To the next adventure, Mira said, holding up an imaginary glass again. Cal matched her gesture, his grin as lopsided as ever. And to keeping our heads in one piece while we figure out what the hell that adventure might be. As the freighter continued its journey through the stars, Mira, Cal, and their ragtag group found solace in the knowledge that they had done the impossible. They'd taken the dance of defiance and turned it into a symphony of freedom, one that even the cold, calculating Xylaris couldn't silence. And here's to proving them wrong, Della added, her voice a mix of hope and determination. The freighter soared on, a testament to human tenacity in a universe that rarely offered second chances. But as long as they had each other, a ship with enough duct tape to hold it together, and a star-studded sky to guide them, they'd fight to make their place in the cosmos. Looks like we're the ones writing the history books now, Mira said, a small smile playing on her lips. Cal nodded, setting the ship on course for their new destination. And it's gonna be one hell of a story. With laughter echoing in the confines of the freighter, they left the Xylaris and the memories of captivity behind, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. For better or worse, they were free spirits in an uncharted universe, with nothing but their wits and each other to rely on, and that, against all odds, felt like enough.